So there is a quick little piece, or there's a quick statement I'd like to make as we do this. And we continue to discover new things. And this just happened recently too. But I've got to tell you that you used to ask me questions about why I did certain things. And you'd say to me, hey, I'm trying to understand why something happened. I'm trying to understand why you did this. And this just happened recently, and I was able to say, that's a good question. I'd like to understand why this happened. Let's talk about that. However, part of our trajectory, part of our history is you would ask me, hey, I'm trying to understand why that happened. And I took that as, I filtered that as you coming at me and saying, I'd like to understand why that was the wrong way. I'd like to understand why you chose the wrong way.
I never meant it that way.
That always became apparent after a fight or an argument where finally I heard you, where perhaps the emotional outburst was necessary for me to have some kind of connection. We've talked about that. I know you never meant that, but
I think I always, I consider it love or someone, or intimacy at any level of my friendships, if someone seeks to understand, if someone says why, or tell me more, or help me understand your thought process. And so in my mind, when I was attempting to ask, it was 1, so I could understand you better. 2, so I could understand humanity better. I just love how humanity works. But it was also so that we could have a conversation. It was kind of my way of trying to love you. My way. What I considered love. And, well, you know.
Ironically, men don't really ask why in a conversation between men, unless it's about figuring out a problem. Like if I'm talking to another guy and we're talking about a decision I made, on any kind of invisible or emotional level, it's like, okay, I trust that. Oh, that's cool. That's great. But if I talk about, having gone from one sort of tool to another tool, there will be a ton of questions about, oh, well, why did you choose that tool? What space were you in? But not for anything that's not extremely pragmatic. So I understand what you were asking, and
now you do.
I do now. And wait, was it really frustrating then for you to do something that you were trying to love me and I was becoming angry at it? What did that feel like?
It felt like being misunderstood. I felt like at that point my motives were challenged. I felt like it didn't matter what I said or did. I was coming against you, and that was it. That's what was happening. And so I learned to not ask.
That's true. You would not ask and not ask and not ask. I felt though there would become a point where I would be on this roll and I would just be in these spaces, and all of a sudden there were things that you had to ask.
Or you would be processing something or having some anxiety, and I would say, okay, help me understand. Or I wouldn't even necessarily use those words. I would just start asking. Every once in a while, they would net really good conversations.
Yeah, and they do now.
Now they do. Yeah. What changed?
One of the ways you used to ask it specifically was this. You used to say, I need to understand why you did that. I need to understand why you made that decision. And the reason was because, and we'll get into this more as time goes by, anxiety is one of the things I struggle with. It's a factor of my life that I take steps to control, and I'm a lot better now. I'm a lot more healthy, but going back, you used to ask, I need to understand why. And the reason was, oh, well, I'm giving in to anxiety right now, or I'm anxious, or I have, and that was why.
But you
And
never
I knew
would,
it.
You never would say that.
Oh, no. And I knew it. And I was so pissed. I was like, oh, man, here I am. Boom. All of a sudden, this happened. And it was an anxious or nervous decision. It was indecision, and it created instability in a decision I made. And it was anxiety. And I didn't want to tell you. I just didn't want to tell you.
So it was defensiveness inside of yourself and self-protection.
Those are really flowery words to say that I wanted to make it look like I really did care. I really did have the best interest. Like I wanted to have. I think that answers your question.
And on this side of our unmarriage, on this side, I feel like I can ask, hey, what's up? Or why'd you do that?
Do you feel the freedom to ask me anything right now?
Yeah. Or like
Okay,
be able to say
that's good.
what's going on, or like when you had anxiety, even this morning, and I was able to say why.
I wasn't going to put it that soon, but okay. Cat's out of the bag.
But like initially you flared, but then you said, I'm flaring because I'm embarrassed that I had anxiety. And I was able to say why. And so we were able to have that conversation,
right,
in a way without any flaring towards each other. Like you were curious yourself about it. I was curious about it.
Yeah.
You were able to acknowledge that anxiety made it you feel frustrated about it, but once you got through the anxiety.
Yeah.
And so I feel like now when those things happen, we can go down the why trail. Why? And we can have a good understanding, a good conversation about understanding. You still won't do it to me.
Well, I was just going to
okay.
go there. I'm starting to get curious about why you do the things you do. And so I'll ask you, but I don't feel like there's an investigation down that path. I'm like, hey, can I understand something? And then you'll say it. And then I can see now over the years why you were like, hey, I wish you would ask me about why I do some of the things I do. Mm-hmm. And actually now I'm realizing that there is a big gap in the things that I don't know about you that I need to know.
But that's also before you didn't do it because it felt like an affront to you. So then you weren't going to come at me like that.
I felt like if I started asking you these questions, I would be questioning your existence.
Right. So again, it was just this internal belief systems, internal conditioning that we never were able to acknowledge or identify until our storyline completely changed.
And change it did.